Welcome to the sixth video in this mating range. And now we're going to look at the opera checkmate. Sorry, I was trying to do a bit of opera singing there. Not good for the ears. But what is the opera checkmate? Well, the opera checkmate involves the rook and the bishop. And the rook comes flying down. Here we go. Rook to d8. And it's defended by the bishop, trapping the enemy's king on the back rank. And there's always something in the way. So it can be any piece here on f7 trapping the king, except for a knight, because obviously a knight would be able to take the rook. And in this situation, the bishop is the piece that also traps the king in. So this is the basic version of the opera checkmate. And I'm now going to explain to you why it's called the opera checkmate and where it came about. So let's move on to the next game. And we have a very famous example of this checkmate in action. So there's quite an amusing story behind the name of this checkmate. Apparently it relates to this game and the position we're going to go through here, which was played in 1858 at an opera house in Paris. Morphy had the white pieces and he was playing against two opponents who took black. The first player was a German noble, the Duke of Brunswick, and also against the French, should we say, posh aristocrats. Lovely. And apparently they had a box at the opera. The opera was going on, but they were making so much noise in the box, which was right next to this opera, that people in the opera, the performers, actually took a look to see what on earth was going on in the box. It was a chess game. It's like being at a football match, putting off the players because there's too much noise, but it was a chess game. So what is this checkmate? Well, let's have a look. Morphy was white. And here he played bishop to g5. And what this game really demonstrates is the power of pieces and quick development. Look at all the white's pieces, lovely developed. And here black flicks in b5, but the queen is trapping the king on e8. The bishop on f8 is trapped. And really black has horrendous pieces throughout his position. So it's time to sacrifice. Morphy plays knight takes b5. And the point of this is, after pawn takes, he has bishop takes b5 check. And now this black king is really open. He blocks with knight bd7, and Morphy increased the pressure with a natural move, castles queenside, bringing the rook into the attack. Black defends by bringing his rook to d8, because there was a threat of bishop takes f6, followed by a capture on d7. And now, what should Morphy play, or what indeed did Morphy play? So put yourself in white's position here and pause the video if you need to. What would you do here? And remember, getting all the pieces into the attack is key, even if you have to sacrifice, because Morphy wasn't afraid to sacrifice. Well, rook takes d7, another beautiful move, because this enables the rook on h1 to come in. Rook takes d7 from black, otherwise he'd lose the queen, and now rook to d1. And in this position, it's not really any good way to stop white taking on d7. Queen to e6 was played, and Morphy now played bishop takes d7 check. Again, black's move here is pretty much forced. Knight takes d7. And can you see in this position the beautiful tactic that Morphy used? And after his next two moves, we have the opera checkmate. So what did white do? Pause if you need to here. Queen to b8 check, removing the knight on d7 from its post. And after the only move, knight takes b8, we can see the combination of the bishop and the rook. And rook to d8 is indeed checkmate there. So a very nice example of the opera checkmate. And let's now look at one last case of this, just so we get a good feeling for really what this checkmate is all about. So we're now going to rely on our good friend Steinitz to demonstrate the opera checkmate. And this is a game he had against a chap called Vines. And black here played knight to a6. So you can see in this position, the black king is not in the center of the board, but we can still create a version of the opera checkmate here. So imagine you're white. How can you try to get this combination of the rooks and the bishop, creating that net around the black king? If you need to pause the video, please do so now. Well, white needs to open up the bishop on f4 first, and there's something in the way of that bishop, the pawn. So d7 check is a very good move, opening up the bishop to the b8 square. And this is the key idea. There's only one move that black can play, and that's rook takes d7. And now, can you see the end? Rook to b8 check. The knight has to capture that rook, and rook takes b8 check. Again, demonstrates the opera checkmate. Slightly different to the last example because we have a rook blocking the king's escape and not a pawn this time, but it's exactly the same concept of bishop and rook. So remember, if you have a bishop striking down across the enemy's king, and if you have a rook that can come down, you should be looking for this kind of pattern in your own games. And that is the opera checkmate for you.